myself, Vidal Cruz, the Little Teacher of Study Hub number 3. So now our topic is all about learner-centered teaching, foundations and characteristics. Then, the paradigm shift from teacher-centered to learner-centered teaching. Then, the dimensions of learner-centered teaching. But before we proceed, let us first know what our learning objectives. So at the end of this unit, the pre-service teacher or the PSD can first differentiate learner-centered teaching from other teaching approaches as applied in various teaching areas. Then second, discuss the need to shift from teacher-centered teaching to learner-centered teaching based on philosophical foundations, teaching principles, and current research. And lastly, discuss the varied roles of teacher in learner-centered teaching and learning. So the content of our discussion will focus on the definition and the description or the characteristics of learner-centered teaching, foundations, and characteristics. Then in teacher-centered philosophies, we have the essentialism and perennialism, which will be discussed by me. In learner-centered philosophies, the progressivism, the humanism, and constructivism will be discussed by Daphne Estrella. Then in supporting research and resistance to change or managing the shift will be discussed to you by Fitch Palares. Then in dimensions of learner-centered teaching, which will include the role of the teacher, the instructor, the function of content, the responsibility for learning, the purpose and processes of assessment, and the balance of power, which will be discussed to you by Miss Ashley Solis. So now let's proceed to my assigned topic on about what is learner-centered teaching. So learner-centered teaching is an approach that places the learner at the center of the learning. Then this means that the learner or student is responsible for learning, while the teacher is responsible also for facilitating the learning. So in a learner-centered teaching environments, learners are of course actively participate in their own learning, then make decisions about what and how they will learn, then become capable of constructing new knowledge and skills by building on the past experiences. And in a learner-centered teaching environment, teachers also recognize that all learners are unique and utilize different teaching styles, then provide structure, of course, and direction to the students, then facilitate learners' decision-making process. So now let's proceed to the characteristics of learner-centered teaching. So importantly, this teaching method contemplates certain peculiarities and differences from the more common teaching methods. So for instance, teacher-centered approaches follow behavioral concepts and apply them to learning. Therefore, teachers become experts who guide students and share knowledge with them. Notably, students there appear as empty vessels that are to be filled with knowledge. However, within the learner-centered methods, the roles are slightly different, bringing more freedom and autonomy to the students. So here are some characteristics of learner-centered teaching. So we have the personalization, the active participation and accountability, the collaboration, then the flexibility, and lastly we have the self-reflection. So in personalization, teachers tailor learning experiences to students' needs and goals to make learning more effective, relevant, and to the point. Then in active participation and accountability, teachers also encourage and provide learner-centered instruction to learners to actively solve tasks, produce solutions to problems, and develop thoughts. Then in collaboration, besides, teachers seek to foster collaborative learning environment so that students can express their needs and integrate their experience in the solutions. Then in flexibility, of course, other than that, Due to all students being different, the learner-centered approach requires instructors to adapt the diverse learning styles and paces. Then, in the self-reflection, teachers also push learners for more reflection so that they can see the issues and find a mechanisms to tackle their in the future. So now let's proceed to the next topic, which is the from teacher-centered to learner-centered teaching philosophies. So the following are the different philosophical perspectives for you to understand why learner-centered teaching is an approach that is far more better than teacher-centered. So in teacher-centered philosophies, we have the essentialism and perennialism. So when we say essentialism, it is the basic academic knowledge and skills and character development, and also in traditional moral values and virtues. And in perennialism, it focuses on everlasting ideas and universal truths learned from art, history, and literature. In addition to that, so when we say essentialism, it is that tries to instill all students with the most essential or basic academic knowledge and skills and character development. So in essentialists believe that teachers should try to traditional moral values and virtues such as respect for authority, perseverance, fidelity to duty, consideration for others, and also practically and intellectual knowledge that students need to become model citizens. And in perennialism, it is a learner-centered educational philosophy that focuses on everlasting ideas and universal truths learned from art, history, and literature. They also believe that ideas are as relevant and meaningful today as when they were written.
Good day everyone, and special greetings to Coach Jude. And this is my assigned topic. First, we have what is learning-centered philosophies. And second, we have progressivism. Third, we have humanism. And the fourth one is constructivism. So, what is learning-centered philosophies? Student-centered learning, SLC, is an educational philosophy that puts a student at the center of the learning process. It's also known as a learner-centered philosophy. So it means that all activities and materials are designed to allow students to learn at their own pace and in their own way. In an SCL classroom, for instance, the teachers offers a variety of activities for students to select from, including choose focus on reading, writing, speaking, listening, problem solving, creating, or critical thinking. Students can choose activities that interest them and what they believe will aid their learning. SCL encourages students to be active participants in their education rather than passively receiving information. They are prompted to ask questions, experiment, and share their knowledge. The teacher served as a guide and facilitator, helping students reach their goals. So now let's move on to the second topic. So what is progressivism? Progressivism is a student-centered philosophy that believes that ideas should be tested by experimentation and learning comes from finding answers from questions. Experimentations. Students are encouraged to test ideas through hands-on projects, research, and practical activities. This approach allows them to understand what works and what doesn't, deepening their comprehension of concept. For example, in a science class, students might experience to see how different ingredients affect plant growth, working in groups to test various ingredients and share results. Finding answers, students are motivated to ask questions and seek answers. Independently with teachers serving as guides, this process may involve reading, consulting others, or conducting additional research. Example, In a history class, a student would investigate questions about a specific period or event, with groups researching different resources and sharing their findings. By applying progressivism, students actively engage in their learning, gaining knowledge through doing, thinking, and inquiry, while teachers facilitate the process. And the third topic, what is humanism? Humanism is a learning-centered philosophy that focuses on the individual learner's development and potential. It emphasizes that students should be actively involved in their education and have the freedom to choose what they learn. Humanism emphasizes the importance of valuing each student as an individual with unique needs, interests, and abilities, advocating for teaching methods that cater to these differences. It promotes active participation, encouraging students to engage in their own learning by asking questions, experimenting, and sharing ideas, rather than being passive recipient of information. Additionally, humanism supports the freedom of choice, allowing students to select topics and learning methods that resonate with them. For example, in a history class, a student might choose a specific period or event to research and present in various formats. In an art class, they would explore different mediums and styles, while in math, they might solve problems using diverse approaches such as formulas or diagrams. By applying humanistic principles, students gain confidence, creativity, and greater interest in learning, with teachers serving as guides and facilitators while students take responsibility for their own knowledge and skill development. The fourth topic, what is constructivism? Constructivism is a student-centered philosophy that emphasizes hands-on learning and students actively participating in lesson. Constructivism believes that students should be able to discover lesson on their own through hands-on actively because it is the most effective way of learning and is considered true learning. Constructivism promotes hands-on learning, encouraging students to learn through experimentation, design, and problem-solving. Rather than just listening to lectures, active participation is essential. Students should ask questions, think critically, and share ideas, with the teacher serving as a guide rather than a source of all answers. Students are encouraged to discover lessons independently, exploring and experimenting to develop their understanding. For example, in a science class, students might experience with different ingredients to see their effects on plant growth, while in history they would blind models of ASEAN cities or ships, researching various historical aspects. In math, they might play games that teach concepts, sharing their findings afterward. By embracing constructivism, students gain confidence, creativity, and a deeper interest in learning, taking responsibility for their knowledge development through active engagement and inquiry. So that's all for my topic. Thank you.
Good day, Coach Jude. I'm Ficha Epelares from Bituled HE 1A. I'm the number 3 from the Study Hub number 3. So now, before I discuss to you our lesson, let's have a short recap of the report of the Ministry of Australia. Learning-centered philosophies. It focuses on student agency, active participants, and personalized learning. They include student-centered learning, progressivism, humanism, and constructivism. It encouraged students to learn at their own pace and style, while progressivism emphasized experiential learning through hands-on project and research. Humanism is recognize individual needs and encourage active participation. Constructivism promotes hands-on learning, independent discovery, and teacher guidance. Let's proceed to our lesson. supporting research. What is supporting research? Supporting research is also known as corroboration, evidence, or supplementary research. Refers to studies, data, or other evidence that independently confirm or strengthen the findings of a primary research study. It acts as a form of validation, bolstering the credibility and reliability of the original research conclusions. Instead of relying solely on one study's results, supporting research provides multiple lines of evidence pointing towards the same conclusion, making the overall argument more robust and less susceptible to challenges. This is establishing a scientific consensus and building a strong body of knowledge on a particular topic. Okay, next is resistance to change by managing the shift. When we say resistance to change, managing the shift, it highlights the pervasive issue of individuals and organizations resisting alterations to establish processes, structures, or ways of working. It's effectively managing this resistance is for successful implementation of any change initiative. This can successfully managing the shift requires a deep understanding of why people resist change and how that resistance is expressed, allowing for the development of tailored and effective solutions. There are 5 dimensions according to Blumberg's. It describes a framework for learner-centered teaching, shifting the focus from the teacher as the sole source of knowledge to the student as an active participant in their learning. Each dimension contributes to creating a more engaging and effective learning environment. So here are the 5 dimensions. First is the function of content. It, as discussed previously, this emphasizes higher order thinking skills and active learning rather than rote memorization. The content is designed to encourage exploration, analysis, and application. The next one is the role of the instructor. When we say the role of the instructor, the instructor's role changes from a lecturer to a facilitator, guide, and mentor. They support student learning through scaffolding, providing resources, and fostering a collaborative environment. So the third one is responsibility for learning. This shifts the responsibility for learning from the teacher to the student. Students are actively involved in setting learning goals, choosing learning activities, and monitoring their own progress. The next one is the purposes and processes of assessment. When we say purposes and processes of assessment, its assessment is not just about measuring what students have memorized, but also about evaluating their understanding, critical thinking skills, and ability to apply knowledge. Formative assessment, for example, ongoing feedback is emphasized to guide learning. So the next one is the balance of power. It's the traditional power dynamic between teacher and students is rebalanced. Students have more autonomy and voice in the learning process. It's contributing to decisions about content, activities, and assessments. These 5 dimensions work together to create a learning environment that prioritizes students' engagement, active learning, and the development of higher order thinking skills, moving away from a passive, teacher-centered approach. When we say function of the content, it is the context refers to the purpose or intended effect of the educational material. Instead of simply requiring rate memorization of facts, the content is designed to promote higher order thinking skills. This means learners are encouraged to analyze, evaluate, synthesize, and apply information rather than just passively absorbing it. Active exploration and reflections are the key components. It's allowing learners to engage deeply with the material and develop a more meaningful understanding.
Good day everyone, I'm the last reporter, so before I will start, I will give a short recap on Peach's report. Supporting research provides additional evidence to validate primary research findings, reinforcing the original research conclusion. Managing resistance to change requires understanding its causes and manifestations. Learner-centered teaching focuses on five dimensions: function of content, role of instructor, responsibility for learning, assessment purposes, and balance of power. It prioritizes student engagement and active learning, focusing on higher order thinking and reflection. So now let's proceed to my topic, which is dimensions of learner-centered teaching. So first is the function of content, but PG already discussed it. So let's proceed to second is the role of the instructor. So the role of the instructor: instructors plan, create and teach lessons and activities that meet their students' learning standards. They set goals, measure progress, encourage participation, and adapt strategies for different learning needs. So here's the common responsibilities for instructor. Plan instructional activities. The instructor creates a course outline that matches the learning goals of their subject. They choose and organize the course content, materials, and teaching methods. The instructor also outlines different ways to assess how well students understand and make progress toward these goals. Engage learners. An instructor plays a key role in motivating learners, creating interest in the subject, and making a good learning environment. They do this by using interactive teaching techniques, connecting the material to real life, and promoting classroom atmosphere where everyone works together. Monitor and adapt to student needs. Teachers watch how students are doing and change how they teach in order to help different kinds of learners. This ongoing change not only makes teaching better but also gives students a fair chance to well and grow in the learning environment. Third is the responsibility for learning. The responsibility for learning is the idea that learners are responsible for their own learning. It involves being proactive and motivated to learn and taking ownership of the learner process. Take responsibility for learning means being prepared, coming to class ready to learn, including doing pre-work like reading and studying, participating, actively listening, asking questions, and contributing to class discussions. Setting goals. Identifying learning objectives and making plans to achieve them. Being self-aware. Knowing your learning style and how you best learn. Being respectful. Valuing others' ideas and working to them, understand them. The purpose and process of assessment. To systematically gather information about a learner's progress, skills, and knowledge, allowing educators to make informed decisions about instruction, identify areas for improvement, and ultimately enhance student learning. Process steps. First is planning. Defining learning outcomes, choosing assessment methods, and designing tests. Data collection. Gathering evidence through various assessment tools like tests, projects, observations, and portfolios. Analysis. Scoring and interpreting the data to understand student performance. Feedback. Providing constructive feedback to students to guide their learning. Reflection. Evaluating the effectiveness of assessment methods and making adjustments if needed. And the last is the balance of power. The balance of power in learning has definitely shifted over time, especially with the rise of digital resources, online platforms, and self-directed learning opportunities. In the past, educators were often the primary source of knowledge and authority controlling what is how students learn. But now, learners have more control with access to information and their fingertips and the ability to choose what, when, and how they learn. There's a growing influence from tech companies and platforms that create learning content and influence how people access education, further complicating the power dynamic. What's interesting is that learners now have more control, but with that comes with the challenge of navigating an overwhelming amount of information and figuring out how to structure their learning. It almost feels like power is shifting to those who can adapt and leverage this new system effectively.
So in conclusion, when we say learner-centered teaching, it is a pedagogical approach that prioritizes the needs, interests, and experience of students, positioning them as active participants in the learning process. So by shifting the focus from teacher-centered instruction to learner-centered education, educators can create a more inclusive, engaging, and effective learning environment. So teacher-centered philosophies, also known as traditional or instructor-centered approaches, position the teacher as the primary authority and transmitter of knowledge. As we have in teacher-centered philosophies, we have the essentialism and the perennialism, and in learner-centered philosophies, we have the progressivism, humanism, and the constructivism. So by considering the five learner-centered teaching dimensions, educators can create a comprehensive learner-centered approach that addresses the whole child cognitively, emotionally, socially, and culturally, physically, and politically. So that's all for our discussion. So we hope that you listen carefully and you understand from it. So again, we are from Study App number 3.